Let's talk about theories. Theories of morality. Now, a lot of times, medyo nagkakaroon ng misconception or sabihin natin nagkakapalitan ng tinatawag nating ethical, and then moral. Well, sa thought or sa idea, may similarity sila. But they are not the same. Kasi every word na ginagamit natin, kaya gumagamit ka ng isang word sa isang bagay, kasi yun yung description niya. So here, ethical and moral, oftentimes people nai-interchange nila yung paggamit nito. Nasa akala nila, when you speak of ethical or moral, it is an act. Okay? Moral act. Pag sinabi natin ethical, it's like a moral act. Well, maraming terms na minsan lagi natin siyang na-encounter. We have the code of ethics, business ethics, pero morality, minsan mahirap natin siya marinig. Wala naman sigurong code of morality. Parang ganun. Now, pag-uusapan natin yan. And then, sometimes then, we have this word na kailangan natin maklarify. Yung tinatawag na amoral. Pag sinabi natin amoral, wala siyang concept ng morality. Yeah. Na parang hindi niya alam yung tama at mali, or hindi niya dinidisregard na yun is either tama or mali. Wala siyang konsepto ng good and bad. Kaya amoral siya. And then we have another thing is non-moral. Non-moral, ito naman yung mga wala rin siya, out of morality din siya. Ito yung mga bagay na minsan ginagamit natin. Cars, yan, cellphones, guns. So they are not neither moral or immoral kasi depende yun sa gumagamit. Okay? Now, those are the technical terms na meron tayo dito. Now, we have here a lot of terminologies na kailangan nating pagtuunan ng pansin, especially on moral issues. The number one here is consequentialist, or tinatawag dito teleological. Here, when we speak of consequentialist or teleological, pag sinabi natin it's grounded on nature. Basically, it pertains to a nature na it's more on like that sa nature. It might be sa human nature and then sa nature, but that's not more on the focus dun sa consequentialist. Kasi traditionally, sabi ni Jacques Tyro, it has been teleological or consequentialist theory kasi demonstrate moral principle and behavior fit into some large purpose. It might be an intrinsically human purpose, or it might be divine purpose of expression of God's will. So, those are things na medyo mahirap siyang intindihin, pero we just leave it as it is there. So, basta ang pointer sa consequentialist, it is grounded on the nature of things. And then, let's talk about egoism. Eto sometimes, yan. Egoism kasi minsan when we speak of egoism, they equate it more often sa pagiging selfish. Tama? Yeah, selfish. Yun naman ang laging iniisip ng iba na very ego-centered person. Very selfish. Dito, ika-clarify natin. The first term na meron tayo is ethical egoism. Sabi dito, this egoistic theory focuses upon the pursuit of self-interest. Tama naman. Self-interest. Well, as for me, I would always believe that man by nature is selfish. But here, let's focus more on this particular thing. The pursuit of self-interest in human conduct. Thus, human beings ought to behave in ways that brings about good consequences. Now, more on itong ethical egoism, under siya sa consequentialist kasi. By the term itself, consequentialist, consequence, ibig sabihin, by the term consequence, ito yung, ano ba yung consequences ng mga ginagawa natin. Okay? Now, dito naman sa ethical egoism, although sabi natin, egoism might sound be selfish, but here, ethical egoism would always be for good consequences. Sa good consequensya. Pero self-interest pa rin. Ethical egoism can be take the three possible forms. May tatlong possible forms itong ethical egoism. Yung una is individual ethical egoism. Yung pangalawa is personal ethical egoism, and then the third one is universal. Now, pag-usapan natin yung una. Individual ethical egoism. Sabi dito, individual ethical egoism states that everyone ought to act in my self-interest. My self-interest. Hindi sinasabi dito. My self-interest. That's the first point dun sa individual ethical egoism. Now, myself ang pinag-usapan dito. Now, on the personal ethical egoism, it states that I ought, dito na, I na, kanina myself, dito, I ought to act in my own self-interest. So, papasok pa rin tinatawag natin self-interest. But that I make no claims about what anyone else ought to do. So, kanina, myself, self-interest. Pero dito naman, ikaw, ito yung, I lang yung pinag-uusapan dito and you don't care about others. However, sa universal ethical egoism naman dito, basic principle that everyone should always act in his own self-interest regardless of the interest of others unless their interest also serves his. So, yun yung kaibahan ng tatlo. So, dito sa universal, everyone always act in his own self-interest. So, ayun na, myself, and then we have the I, and then everyone. But, nagkakapareho sila sa tinatawag nating self-interest. They always have the tendency for their self. Pinapalaga nila yung self. Now, we should not equated ethical egoism with selfishness. Magkaiba po yun, ha? Hindi sila magkaparehas. Now, the antonym of selfishness is altruism. Now, according to Robert Solomon, altruism in two parts. We have psychological altruism and ethical altruism. Psychological altruism states that people naturally act for the benefit of others. So, yun yung psychological altruism. So, they are doing something for the good of others. While ethical altruism views that people ought to act for the benefit of others. Now, magulo, di ba? Kasi, wag nating masyadong isipin na magkapareha sila. Ang kaibahan dito is psychological altruism is people naturally act. Natural yun sa tao. Okay? Natural sa tao ang paggawa for the benefit of others. While ethical altruism views that people ought gagawin niya para sa benefit ng iba. Yun yung kaibahan. Yung isa is natural, the natural tendency of people. Pero yung isa is you ought to act para sa benefit ng others. And we have another one. Ito yung sinasabi dito ni Victor Gratian, describes psychological egoism as a voluntary human acts to promote his own self-interest, and people do things for others only because they are expect something in return. So ito pa yung isang definition ni ang description ni Victor Gratian sa psychological egoism, na ang tao, they are doing something, they act something to promote their own self-interest. Tapos they're doing things kasi they're expecting something in return. Nababayaran sila ng tao na yon. Na ginawa nila ito, I give you a favor, and then you have to give a favor. You have to favor me back sa mga ginawa ko para sa'yo. So that's ethical egoism. Now, we move on dun sa tinatawag na utilitarianism. Yung pangalawang uri ng consequentialist. Utilitarianism. Isang uri ito ng consequentialists. Now, this ethical theory tries to answer the question, what makes an action or practice right or wrong? Ito yung tinatanong dito sa utilitarianism. Paano ba natin malalaman na mali o tama yung isang action? Now, Jacques Tyler says that utilitarianism is an ethical theory whose principal architects were Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. I don't know kung nabanggit ko ito dun sa nakaraan sa principle of utility. Sabi ni John Stuart Mill, he further says that it derives its name from the word utility, which means usefulness. Ano ba yung magagamit natin dun sa bagay na yun? Kaya nga, utilitarianism siya. Kasi when we speak of utility, nagagamit natin siya, nag-utilize natin. Accordingly, utilitarianism says that the act is right or moral if it is useful. So, pag useful yung isang actions natin, yung isang action natin, or our actions, kung useful siya, dun pumapasok yung utilitarianism. Now, everyone should perform the act or follow that moral rule which will bring about the greatest good or happiness for everyone concerned. Now, the reason for mentioning both acting and following rules is utilitarianism is generally found in two main forms. We have the act utilitarianism and the rule utilitarianism. So may dalawang uri pa ito. We have the act and rule utilitarianism. Rule utilitarianism, however, was formed to answer many of the act utilitarian's problem. Now, sabi ang view ni Victor Gratian sa utilitarianism, sabi niya, the rightness or wrongness of actions and moral rules should be evaluated solely in terms of their consequences for all concerned. That is, in terms of the ability to maximize the good. Now, kaya nga nakapaloob siya sa consequentialists, kasi titingnan natin ano ba yung consequences ng action natin. If the consequences of our action is good for the good of the other, for the good of the many, now, pasok siya dun sa tinatawag nating utilitarianism. Basically, ang pinag-uusapan dito, that utilitarianism should be the greatest good for the greatest number. So, halimbawa, dun sa isang grupo, merong isang hindi matino dun sa grupo. They have to sacrifice that one para dun sa siyam. So, they need to eliminate that bad in order for the good of the many. Or like in decision making, kung sinong mas nakararami, parang sa nakabubuti na nakararami, then it will be for the good of the many. Kasi hindi naman pwede magsakripisyo yung mas marami kaysa dun sa iilan lang. So dito pumapasok yung utilitarianism. Utilitarianism always falls down dun sa tinatawag nating good for the benefit of the many, for the greatest number. Now, dito naman tayo sa non-consequentialist or deontological. Here, this non-consequentialist, sinasabi dito, medyo kabaliktaran siya dun sa consequentialist. 'Di ba? They are more of the consequences. The good, kung ano yung good, kung goodness, kung good yung consequence na yung kinalabasan ng isang action. Here, ang sinasabi dito that regardless of that consequence, ang pinapakita dito dapat makita natin that we need actions justifiable dapat yung action mo, showing that it is right. Hindi naman ibig sabihin na yung kinalabasan niya is tama, pero the action should be tama. Yun yung pinaglalaban dito. Kasi sabihin natin kung good for the many pero the action is not good, then it falls down to non-consequentialist. Ito yung pinaglalaban dito ni Immanuel Kant. Sabi dito, Kant did not think that ordinary person needed the guidance in arriving or at more enlightened moral judgment. Kasi sabi din dito sa position dito ni Kant was inexplain siya ni Jacques, na sabi dito ni Jacques Tyro that nothing is good in itself except a good will. And will is the unique human ability to act in accordance with the rules. Tama naman, kasi kung may goodwill yung isang tao, may will yung isang tao, he wills to do good, then ibig sabihin, he is doing what is good. Pero kung if we rely on the consequences, regardless of the process, di ba? Doon sa utilitarianism, ang makikita nating whole doon na ang butas doon even though mali yung actions niya, basta makakatulong siya sa nakararami, then okay pa rin yun kasi good yung consequences. Pero here, sa non-consequentialist, ang pinaglalaban dito is, sabi niya, na dapat will yung masusunod. Kasi if you have a good will, then a person will always strive to do good. Kasi good nga yung will niya Pero, dito naman si Henry Pesch, medyo alanganin siya doon sa theory ni Kant. Kasi, in-exclude ni Kant ang ultimate end of morality, which is God. Kasi if you study ethics, the ultimate end is always God. But here, Kant disregarded the ultimate end as God. Na ang gusto lang ni Kant dito, that goodwill results, dapat ginagawa yun ng results always with good activities. Kasi yun ang kagustuhan natin. But here, sabi ni Henry Pesch, he commented on Kant that Kant is equally wrong when he rejected that the hope of happiness, not only the ultimate goal of moral effort, but also as any kind of motive at all. So parang nawawala nga na dito ng motive. Kasi you excluded the happiness. Kasi dun sa consequentialist, good for the many. Now, sabi din ba natin sa una na happiness, sabi ni St. Thomas, is kung nasusuffice yung ating kagustuhan, yung mga bagay-bagay. Pero if we disregarded the ultimate end, which is God, well, happiness for us will be gone also. Kasi people are striving to reach the ultimate end, the ultimate happiness that we have, which is God. Next topic natin, which is number 3, is absolutism. Now, absolutism, considered by Jacques Tyro as one of the extremes in moral reasoning. Absolute means perfect quality, complete, as Tyro would put it. He also considers absolutism not limited by restriction. In other sense, it means not to be doubted or questioned, positive, certain, and unconditional. He states further that absolutism has been used to describe a supernatural being, which is God. Laws of nature, propositions concerning truth and falsity, and law and morality. So, ito yung pinupukusan dito ng absolutism. Now, we have sa absolutism naman, medyo nagkakatalo naman tayo dito. Lalo na sa cultural absolutism. Kasi dito, when we speak of absolutism, yung rules and moral standards ay pare-parehas. Now, but in cultural absolutism, hindi siya pwedeng ganon. Kasi there are some cultures that believe in these things and other culture will not believe in these things. Say for example, sa Pilipinas, diba? Yung kultura natin dito, circumcision, diba? Once you reach the right age or yung tinatawag nating pagbibinata sa mga lalaki, that moment kailangan mo na magpatuli. Why? Because it's in the culture. Tama yun sa atin. Pag hindi ka tuli at that certain age or may asawa ka na tas hindi ka pa tuli, then you will be bullied, di ba? Na hindi ka pasok sa kultura ng mga Pilipino. Now, if you go to other countries like Korea and other countries who are not fond of circumcision, di ba? Hindi naman nila parang hindi naman sa kanila importante yung circumcision. So here, cultural absolutism is ito naman yung butas niya dito. Now, when we speak of cultural absolutism, na hindi lahat ng moral principles ay pinaniniwalaan na pare-parehas. There are different moral principles sa iba't ibang kultura. Like sa other sa Islamic culture, 'di ba? I don't know if kung totoo that some can marry more than one, 'di ba? Sa Muslim. 'Di ba? That's their cultural that's their culture na pwede, as long as you can both parties ay have this consent, 'di ba? The man can marry more than two, 'di ba? Or more than one, 'di ba? However, for us Filipinos, hindi pwede yung na sa kultura natin, hindi yung moralidad natin na ganun, hindi pasok 'yon. So iba nang iisipin sa atin pag ganun. Now, let's talk about relativism. Sa relativism, meron tayong tatlong uri. We have the cultural, we have the situational, and we have the normative. Now, sa cultural relativism dito, ang point naman dito ng cultural relativists are that moral beliefs are neither inborn nor result of logical reasoning, but are rather internalized reflection of the views of our culture, transmitted to us by our parents and other environmental influences. So dito sa cultural relativism, nagbibigay sa atin dito ng ideas or the cultures na meron tayo. Kung ano yung nakagisna natin, nakagawian natin. So that's what we have. That's what we are. Kaya nga sabi ng 'di ba? Na hindi lang yung magulang mo, hindi lang yung kung ano yung meron ka. Kung ano yung meron ka ngayon is because of your culture, yung nakapaligid sa'yo. Yung ano yung kinalakihan mo. Now, there's like, sabi nga, may isang bata na napakagaling magbilang. Sabi ng teacher, ang galing mo naman magbilang. Ang galing mo magbilang from 1 to 10. Di ba? Sino nagturo sa'yo niyan? Sabi ng bata, yung mga magulang ko po, sila po nagturo sa akin. Wow, ang galing naman at tinuturuan ka ng parents mo. Di ba? Sige nga, ano yung susunod sa 10? Sabi ng bata, Jack Queen King po. So, ibig sabihin, the parents ay mga sugarol, di ba? Na yung nagtuturo, so ibig sabihin, marunong sila sa baraha. So, that's their culture na meron sila. But we are not condemning them, di ba? So, ang pinupunto lang natin dito is cultures affect dun sa tao. Dito naman sa situational relativism is we are going to base sa situation. Diba, halimbawa, bakit kailangan mo magsinungaling? Nagsinungaling ka kasi kailangan mong magsinungaling para maligtas yung isang buhay ng isang tao. Diba, may isang taong naghahanap or may isang mamamatay tao na naghahanap sa isang taong ganito. So, tinanong nga kung nasaan itong tao na to. So, sasabihin mo ba? So, sometimes we lie kasi dahil sa situation, we live to save a life. Yeah, so that's one example of situational relativism. Dito naman sa normative relativism, now sometimes we judge people based on our standard. Yeah. Nakikita natin siya na ganun siya, hindi naman pala, 'di ba? Na minsan titingnan natin na may mga tao na professional na, pero kung titingnan natin, kumakain pa rin naman sila ng mga tuyo, ng mga ganyan, ng mga gulay na ano. Kasi minsan nakalagay sa standard natin na once na mga professional yung tao, hindi sila kumakain ng mga ganyan. Now, dito naman sa normative relativism, we susukatin natin yung morality ng isang tao base sa kanyang moralidad na meron. Kasi paano mo naman masusukat yung moralidad ng isang tao kung gagamitin natin panukat yung moral standard mo. So it should be the standard norm dun sa tao na i-judge natin, dapat yung norm na meron siya. Now, ang weakness naman dito sa relativism is nagiging inconsistent siya. Kasi, di ba, meron tayong situational, meron tayong normative, meron tayong cultural relativism. So, it's like here, sabihin natin, the 10 commandments will be meaningless kung gagamitin natin dito yung relativism. Number 5, we have determinism. So, may dalawang uri din tayo ng determinism. We have the hard determinism and then the soft determinism. Determinism is a philosophical theory stating everything in the universe, including human actions and choices, is entirely governed by causal law. So you have the theories of causality. So lahat ng nangyayari is may cause, may dahilan. And then dito titingnan natin sa hard and soft determinism kung ano yung mga yan. Sa hard determinism naman, we are never justified in holding person morally responsible or blameworthy for his actions. Kasi ang tanong doon kanina is, are human beings morally responsible for their actions? So kasi yung pinaglalaban dito is, everyone is may be free to act in accordance with his or desire. So ano yung kagustuhan natin, we just do it. So yun sa hard determinism. While sa soft determinism naman, it holds the fact that the acts are unfree only they are caused in particular way. So sa soft determinism naman, hindi daw tayo, yung actions natin are not free. Meron lang mga dahilan kung bakit natin ginagawa yung mga bagay na yan. Sabi ni Thoreau sa kanyang Ethics, Theory and Practice, the soft determinists believe in the universal causation originating human beings. Tapos yung pinagsasabi dito na human freedom, na actually dito naman talaga na parang gumagawa lang sila ng rason na may human freedom, pero actually freedom that we are saying, pinagsasabi natin na freedom, hindi naman talaga actually free. Hindi naman talaga tayo, we are not completely free to act on our desire. We cannot really snap our finger na parang mapatay natin yung isang tao tapos tanggalan natin ng oxygen. Hindi naman tayo talaga free. Na hindi tayo humihinga, di ba? Na kung gusto natin maghuminga, di ba? Hindi naman ganoon. Sige. Kahit hindi ka huminga, darating yung punto sa buhay mo na kailangan mong huminga. Wala pa akong nabalitaan na namatay dahil sa ayaw huminga. Diba? Pag pinigilan mong huminga, ewan ko lang, kung pagdating doon sa dulo, hindi ka talaga, yung katawan natin will do the action to breathe. Determinism here is obviously opposite of freedom. This theory is applied in particular moral issues might free of an individual from any moral responsibility. This is not the case, however, in Christian morality. Na minsan kasi, free tayo sa responsibility, pero sa Christian teaching, sa Christian morality, Christianity teaches us that we are created by God, not as machines and robot. We have the free will, we have the freedom Yun yung binigay sa atin. That's what makes us human. Yung freedom na yun. Kasi kung ginawa tayong robot ng Diyos, then we are not human. We are merely robots. At the end, yung pinag-uusapan dito is freedom. There's always a unprecedented drive for freedom. Lahat naman ng tao, we are always looking for freedom. Pero how can we achieve or attain this freedom? Well, the gospel of Jesus Christ teaches us that the message of freedom and the force for liberation, we should be free from sin. Yeah? Free from sin. Doing everything what we want except sin. Yeah. Gawa natin yung mga gusto natin maliban sa kasalanan, and do everything na wala tayong tinatapakan na mga tao. So, that's it. And then, shout out nga pala sa mga taong to. Yan, pakibasa na lang. Okay, shout out sa inyo.